I'm Rob Crute. I'm 56-year-old and I was born in Hordern, but I currently live in Blackhall Colliery. I worked at Blackhall Colliery when I first left school in 1978. I was there for 3 years, and then it wasn't the pit closure programme, but Blackhall Colliery closed. It started in 1981 up to 1983, and at that point I transferred to Easington Colliery further up the coast. Well, from 1983 there'd been an overtime ban from the end of October in the pits, and we were aware that there were rumblings, for want of a better word, coming from South Wales. Some of the miners down there were a little bit concerned about rumours they'd heard about a national pit closure programme. Word spread, and it came to a point in the first week in March in 1984 at the Miners' Welfare at Easington, where we all had a show of hands, and it was voted almost unanimously, as I recall, to come out on strike.
And how long were you on strike for?
For the full 12 months. It was almost, I believe it was almost 12 months to the day. I recall going back to work on the Tuesday. I don't know why we didn't go back on the Monday, but I recall going back to work on the Tuesday. It would have been the second week in March in 1980. I was still living with my mum at the right at the start of the strike, but I moved to Blackhall halfway through the strike. So I started off in Peterlee, ended up in Blackhall. But I'd always had very close links with Blackhall. I spent a lot of time there. I was raised there effectively from the age of 4 or 5. I lived along at Blackhall Rocks, and of course with working at the pit I had a lot of friends, had a lot of contact, social contacts in Blackhall. So that was the strength of Blackhall and places like that, the very strong social networks. Everybody knew everybody else. Everybody didn't exactly live in each other's pockets, but you knew everybody else's business. Very close, very tight-knit communities. And that really was because everybody was in the same boat. They all didn't all work at the pit, of course, but the vast majority of the men worked at the pit. The vast majority of the women would work in textiles, or even in those days you still had women staying at home. But the point is, everybody in Blackhall was all, you know, they all lived in the same community. It was a very, very strong community spirit. That's still there to some extent, although it has been weakened over the last 30 years. So I think once the strike started, I think the community started to organise itself. There was coordination, of course, on a regional and national level for the picketing, but as far as things worked in the village itself, that automatically picked up. 1984, right at the beginning, we were going to coke works and other ancillary works where they would use coal. So you'd have a lot of wagons coming in and out. You were trying to stop them, sometimes trying to persuade them from going in. That wasn't always effective. I've got to be honest, as the strike wore on, the police became more of a hindrance than a help. Some of them were fine, you could talk to them. Some of them were very obstructive, and you'll know that there were police from other parts of the country as well who didn't know the communities, didn't understand the communities, didn't understand what the strike was all about, or at least gave the impression that they didn't. And that could be problematic as well. There were often flare-ups on the picket lines, so you had to be pretty careful. At the beginning it wasn't like an enjoyable experience, but it was a bit banter. But it seemed to develop into something a little bit more sinister quite quickly, and I think it was as the strike wore on, bearing in mind right at the beginning we didn't know it was going to last for a year, of course. You kid yourself, it'll last for a few weeks, a few months, although we knew there was stockpiles right the way throughout the country. So I think deep down we knew it could go on for a long time, but as the strike wore on, it became more gruelling, and well, like I said, it wasn't really enjoyable at the beginning, but it did take a more sinister turn. In one sense, it wasn't so bad. As I said earlier, everybody was in the same boat. We either all had something or we all had nothing. You kicked one of us and we all got the bruise. And that that held true throughout the strike in areas like Blackhall and Hordern and Easington. But it did become increasingly difficult, certainly when there was talk quite late in the strike after the halfway point when some men were talking about going back to work. At the time it was very, very difficult to understand that. Looking back, I still find it difficult to understand, but you do get an inkling. At the time I was a single lad. I know the pressures that must have been on some families, that must have been unbearable. They had no work, they had no money coming in, and I mean they had out. You would get £2 a day if you went picketing. If you didn't go picketing, you left to God and good nature. So I understand the pressures that must have been on them. But the vast majority of men and the families as well, the wives and the families, were of the opinion if we don't stick together, then what's happened behind us has all been wasted.
Yeah.
You know, once you go past that point, you know, you get to that point of no return. And that was the most difficult part of it, when it looked like the strike was starting to break.
Yeah.
We knew the police were always against us, we knew that the government was always against us, but we hadn't took account, or certainly I hadn't took account of the importance of the media and the pressure they put on. You might recall quite developed into the strike. Every night when the news came on, you had numbers of men returning to work in certain regions. We knew that was false. It was all cold-board propaganda, but it had the desired effect. You know, people were getting absolutely pig sick of the daily grind of having no money, you know, having nothing to do apart from going down the beach and picking bits of sea coal up or going picketing and things like that. And you know, you can understand why people had enough of it, but we'd all gone past that point of no return and we had to see it through.
Yeah.
So like I said, you do tend to look back, you know, when you have a little bit more understanding of what it must have been like for those lads who were under pressure to go back. But at the time it just wasn't acceptable. I still don't find it acceptable now. I think it's the worst thing in the world. You know, not the worst thing in the world, but I find it very difficult to understand how somebody would go back to work, certainly when you've lived in a community like that all of your life. It's very difficult. There's anecdotal evidence of the strike in '26, where families have never repaired themselves since then, you know, parents against sons. Certainly in Wales, I don't know why it was Wales, but there was pockets of Wales during the strike in '26 where it was, you know, they still have that animosity there. Still do. In our Cllr villages now, it's not unspoken. It's not one of those things that you never speak about. Not like it's tried to be hushed up, but nobody would go around saying they were proud of going back to work during the strike. You know, they'd get a little bit of advice if they did. Once we'd gone back to work, we knew the writing was on the wall. Yeah. And it soon became apparent that what the NUM had said all along about the pit closure programme wasn't just true, it had been under exaggerated, if there's such a word as that. I think we'd got the figures wrong. The pit closure programme was much wider than anybody had ever thought. But the NUM was vindicated, the communities were vindicated, we were right, we knew what we were doing, we were fighting against a pit closure programme that the government had denied ever existed. It wasn't a pleasant job. You know, nobody likes plodding around in water or swallowing dust or working in the dark. But after all, it was a job, and again, there were positive aspects to it. I think you have to see it as a glass half full as well. You know, a lot of these communities had virtually full employment. There was a camaraderie of working down the pit. The pubs and clubs were busy every night. You know, people worked shifts, so you know, during the day you'd go down the gardens, and the lads who were in afternoon shift or in first shift, they'd be down the gardens. You know, there was a more bustling place, although Blackhall still has retained that sense of life. If you walk down Middle Street now, you can still see that bustle in the street that you might not see elsewhere. But there was strong points about the pit, and it was mainly that full employment where you didn't have, well, you would have kids hanging around on street corners, but they weren't idle. You know, in those days, you were, you know, if you were in back shift, you were too tight to be hanging around the streets, or you had money in your pocket, you'd go to the club, or you'd go to the pictures, or, you know, you'd be going out and doing things, and the village was thriving. All of the villages were thriving. Once the pit closed down, the biggest impact for me, which we didn't see immediately, was what would happen to the Cllr housing stock, and that is just becoming apparent now. The problems that we had left once the Cllr housing stock was transferred to the private sector. First off, through, you know, big housing groups, wasn't so much of a problem because they could vet tenants, and they were, you know, quite responsible and effective in getting problem tenants out. It was when you had pockets of private sector home ownership, they would let homes to absolutely anybody. Now, I don't want to sound like, you know, Blackhall's not a welcoming place. It is, as long as you carry your cup level. But you did have some elements coming in, certainly over the last 10, maybe 15 years, who haven't carried the cup level. They've caused problems, and because you've got that private sector housing that's unregulated, you can't do a thing about it. You know, great. I don't sound like an old man where they said, well, you know, you speak to people these days about, you know, it was better, you know, back in the 30s and 40s. Don't forget there was a war on, you had Germans dropping bombs on your head, you had rickets and rationing books. But you know, everybody says they passed through rose-tinted glasses, don't they? But Blackwall was a fantastic place. I mean, I was born in Horton, so my earliest memories are of, you know, living in Horton. My grandparents lived in Horton, so I was up and down the street down there. Shops were always open, there was cafes there, and you know, there were lively places, pit villages in those days. Obviously the pit was open, as I mentioned, the full employment, lots of money sloshing about. Blackwall still is to some extent, but Blackwall was a great place, and it was fairly unique in one sense, because on one side to the east you've got the beach banks, the nature down there, the attraction of the beach. On the other side you've got the countryside all the way up to Heselton and beyond, up to Castleton. On the south side, on the border with Hartlepool, we've got Crimden and Crimden Ding. Of course, to the north, before you get to Horton, we've got Castleton Ding. So surrounded with beautiful countryside, lots of places to go. And one of the biggest attractions for me coming from Blackwall was walking down to Crimden with me mum and dad, and I'm sure you'll have done work before on Crimden, what it was like in the 60s and 70s. Magnificent place. When you're a bairn, you know, you go down there, you smell the ozone, and you used to go to the pavilion, you know, and this is all part of our own community, although it was separate, you know, it's a mile down the road from the rocks where I lived, but it was in 10-15 minute walking distance, and it was an absolutely magical place. And it'd be great to say that come back again. We all know the reasons for that, economic reasons, people going on holiday abroad. I think there's a possibility that could turn back on itself now, where you might have people, you know, coming back to England for the holidays, and regionally, if we can get the visitor numbers right, get the economy right, get the facilities back down there, then there's no reason why that couldn't come back. And that does benefit areas like Blackwall, former pit villages, where, you know, it was always used as a conduit on a weekend for people going down there. It benefits the villages themselves in return, because you had people coming from all over the northeast and other parts of the country to Crimden, and would go to Blackwall, spend the money in the pubs, the clubs, the butchers, the bakers. So, you know, they're all go hand in hand. But going back to the point you made originally, what it was like in Blackwall, absolutely wonderful place to live. The facilities were there, and I'm proud that to some extent we've still kept those facilities, the welfare parks, children's play areas, the infrastructure. Even though we've got the, you know, the government cuts to contend with, we're still keeping our heads above water. We managed during the strike, and we're managing against this onslaught as well. How long we can hold out, I don't know, but we do still have that very strong community spirit in Blackwall, and I'm sure that'll see us through.